Buongiorno and a very warm welcome from a very freezing cold day in sunny England. Temperature today is -3 degrees. Look at my lawn, it's got this beautiful white glaze from the frost. Overnight the temperature was -5 degrees. I do not know about you, but during this time of the year I absolutely love cooking and eating comforting and hearty meals. And today I will be bringing a bit of Tuscany, northern Italy, into your kitchen with a beautiful and warming rustic soup. It's a Tuscan White Bean Soup. And of course the bonus is that it is made with very simple and healthy ingredients straight from the heart of Italian cooking. This is our beautiful bay leaf and it's an endless supply for flavors and I will be using some of them today for a vegetable stock I'll be making. What I've just handpicked from Julie's wonderful vegetable patch is a mixture of kale, spinach and chard. Also my hands are beginning to get really cold and numb and it's time to move my bald head in the warmth indoors where I can show you how to cook this beautiful soup. Outside I mentioned that I was going to make a vegetable stock, so I'll do that fast so that we can get that out of the way. When I make vegetable stock, I always make a little bit more than what I need and I use a couple of carrots just as they are. I give them a good wash, I didn't peel them or anything. This is a celery stick, again I just washed it, and even those rough bits you can leave them on. A couple of bay leaves which you saw me picking earlier. And here is a white onion and I always use white onions when I make vegetable stock. Two reasons. One, because they are a little bit more aggressive than the red onions, but also because I don't remove all of the peel like I've done here. I've taken some off, but I'll leave some on and I'll chop it in half like so, and I'll put it in with all the peel because that will release a lovely golden color which will make the stock look beautiful. Cold water, and I'm gonna cover everything with cold water. Quantities entirely up to you. For this recipe you will not need more than about 1 liter, but this is a jug of approximately 1.5 liter. And before it goes on the hob, I'll add half a teaspoon of salt. And be careful with the salt because the saltness of the stock clearly will drive also the saltness of the soup. And you can always add it later, but you cannot take it away, of course. I'll put this on the hob, and as soon as it starts boiling, I'll turn it down to medium-low and I'll leave it to simmer for about 15 to 20 minutes until the stock is ready. In the meantime, I'll make the base for a sofritto, which will be made of carrots, a red onion. I'll be using a couple of sticks of celery and again some bay leaves. Olive oil in the bottom of a pan. With the carrots, I'm removing the top and the bottom, just like this. And earlier I gave them a good scrub with this potato scrubber, and I washed them, and I'm going to leave the skin on as it is really healthy.
Extra roughage. Fibre, isn't it, in this cream?
Yep, fibre. And I'm chopping them today in a diagonally shape as they will look prettier. And in they go with the oil. This time I've removed all of these strands from the celery sticks as they will be in the soup, otherwise they'll be very annoying when you're eating them. And I'll do the same I did with the carrots. I'll chop them in diagonally. There you go. Another couple of bay leaves. And I'm moving to the onion. Now obviously I've removed the skin as you don't want that in your soup, and I'm now chopping it into little pieces like this, about ½ centimeter. And there he goes.
Looking lovely already.
And I'm ready to move on to the hob now. My vegetable stock is boiling away, so I'll turn it down actually so that it doesn't overfill. And my vegetables are beginning to sizzle now, so I will leave the temperature on a medium-high number 6, and I'll leave them just do their own thing for about 6 to 7 minutes. And while my vegetables sizzle, I'll make a good use of thyme, and I'm going to mix all of the herbs together. This is thyme, and I'm going to use 1 level teaspoon, followed by ½ teaspoon of smoked paprika, but also you do not have to use smoked paprika. You can use normal paprika or you can use spiced paprika, entirely up to you, personal choices. Chili flakes to give the soup a lovely little kick, especially in the depth of winter, but I will not be putting a lot in, just ½ teaspoon like this.
Could you use hot, fresh chili?
Yeah, you can use fresh chili, yeah, absolutely, if you've got access to fresh chili, but entirely up to you. Fresh chilies have got slightly different flavor than the dry chilies, but they're just as good. Rosemary is my next herb, and this is fresh from my garden. If you do not have access to fresh rosemary, use dry rosemary. I would have used dry rosemary if I didn't have a massive plant in the garden. Quantity wise, if you were to use dry rosemary, 1 teaspoon will be fine. Whereas if, like me, you're using the fresh stuff, make sure that you cut it in small pieces. Just like this. And this recipe capitalizes on the flavors from the herbs as well as the flavor from the garlic. So you can see that I've got 3 cloves here, which I'm crushing in. But if you're not too keen on garlic, you can be careful and use less, maybe 1 or half. Or if you don't like it, you don't use any at all. It's entirely up to you. But if you like it, use it. And of course I've got a garlic crusher here, so I'm using it, but if you didn't have one, just chop it with your knife in tiny little pieces. It will be just as good. I am now having 400 grams of fresh plum tomatoes. You can also use cherry tomatoes, or indeed, if you like, you can use the chopped canned tomatoes. It doesn't make much difference. The reason I'm using the fresh ones today is because, here Julie, you mind moving here? I'm using fresh vegetables. You see me picking them from the garden, so I'm using the opportunity to stick as much as possible to fresh vegetables. But again, you can use the tin tomatoes, they're just as good. And as I am preparing all of my vegetables, I'll move on to the kale, spinach and chard. And you can use any of those 3 if you like. You can also use frozen spinach, which most probably is likely to be a little bit more accessible at this time of the year, or any leafy greens. In the UK we can buy spring greens, I think they're called.
Yeah.
They're always available. Anything that is cabbage, yeah, you can use cabbage, but be careful with cabbage, not too much, because it could be a little bit overpowering. But clearly, if you're using kale or spinach, specifically spinach, you will be very, very close to the Tuscany, original Tuscan recipe. And this will shrink to nothing, so do not worry. It looks a bit majestic, but all of that grandeur will disappear when it goes in the pot. And I'm now moving on to the beans, and I will be using butter beans today. You can also use cannellini beans if you wish. They are just as delicious and perfect and excellent for either ways, regardless of what you choose to use. But I will be keeping the water, by the way. I will not be throwing the water away because it's full of flavor. So I always think it's a shame when people rinse the water, especially if you're cooking soups and things like that. There is nothing wrong with it. But I'll move them in a jar, ready for later. The reason why I also want to use butter beans is because they got more of a buttery taste, but also they're more velvety and a little bit more elegant. Whereas the cannellini beans are a little bit more rustic in flavor, and they also smaller, and from a taste perspective they're beautiful both cases. This is a dry butter bean. You can choose to soak them in water before you cook them later. In my case, I've chosen to use the tin ones because I've got them in the cupboard. Otherwise, I would have actually soaked these. However, were you to soak your cannellini or your butter beans, the instructions on the package say to soak them overnight 8 to 12 hours. I've done that in the past and it hasn't worked out. I have found out that actually, in this particular case, maybe because they're bigger, they need to soak for a good 24 hours and change the water 3 times. Also, the cooking time, I don't think is very accurate either, because if you cook them for about half an hour, which is what they suggest in the packaging, they're still hard. So cook them at the very least 55 minutes to an hour until they are soft enough that they taste okay. So my vegetables have been seasoning for a good 7 minutes now, and they're beginning to soften up. And this is a good time where I can add my mixture of herbs and garlic. I'm going to raise the temperature slightly, so just 30 seconds, enough for the flavor from all of my herbs to infuse with the vegetable. No more than 30 seconds and I'll add my tomatoes. Immediately followed by the butter beans and their own water. And I'll turn the temperature up on maximum until the water from my butter beans start boiling. And I'm topping everything up using my vegetable stock until I leave a good couple of centimeters from the top of my beans. So my beautiful soup is beginning to boil. I'll place the lid on, like so, and at the moment it's on maximum temperature. I'm going to turn it to medium-low, number 4. And as the beans are already pre-cooked, you will not need to cook for very long, so about 15 to 20 minutes before I add my greens. So time to make some rustic Italian croutons next. There are no real rules here, of course, you do whatever you like. I've got here some tiger bread, which I'm using, but I would have used most probably ciabatta bread or any bread that you have got available in your fridge or in your freezer. And using a bread knife, as I'm cutting bread for a change, I'm doing them in approximately 1 to 2 centimeter cubes. I will be doing them in the air fryer, as it's the only thing I'm cooking today, and I don't fancy turning the oven on and using a lot more energy. But I'm gonna put them in a glass bowl so that I can show you step by step what I do. But if you've got an air fryer, just throw them inside. As I'm making a Tuscan bean soup, I've got some Tuscan seasoning, which ironically has got very similar ingredients in terms of the herbs to what I'm using in the soup. But you do not have to have Tuscan seasoning. You can use Italian mixed spices, or you can use a straight oregano, which is just as delicious.
To be fair, you could just use olive oil and some salt and pepper and they'd still be lovely, wouldn't they?
They will indeed, yes. Just olive oil, salt and pepper. Olive oil does no wonders. A little pinch of salt, pepper. Although there will be some pepper already in my seasoning.
We like it quite peppery, don't we?
We do, yes. And lastly, some olive oil. And I'm gonna pour a generous amount, most probably a good tablespoon all over everything.
Your tablespoons are enormous.
The tablespoons. And go in and mix everything together. And I'll pop them in my air fryer, and I will cook them for approximately 10 minutes, temperature of 180 degrees. That should be plenty. Depending on how powerful your air fryer is, also big, you will have to judge it. But generally, 10 minutes is plenty until they're golden in color and lovely and crispy. Time for the vegetables to go in. Oh my God, the smell! It's a tsunami of Italian herbs. Let's take a quick look. Oh yeah, look at that, wonderful. Anyway, let's add them in as they are. Hopefully you'll be able to do it better than me. I don't make such a mess.
I'm amazed that they're still so good and
Yeah,
edible, bearing in mind it's been so cold and everything's been so frozen. But there we are.
Yeah, obviously they're very good. I'm turning the temperature on maximum now because clearly the vegetables are cold and they will have lowered the temperature of my soup. But it will not take very long. And they're already shrinking in size as I put them in anyway. But I'll put the lid back on and I'll turn the temperature again down onto medium-low number 4. If you've got a gas hob, minimum. And I will leave them now for 7 to 10 minutes and then they should be ready. My soup is nearly ready, but my croutons are done and they've been cooling down now for a few minutes. Look how beautiful they are, lovely and golden in color. What we tend to do with ours, we make a little bit more than what we need and then we store them in a glass jar, but we will obviously allow them to completely cool down and dry before we store it away. And as long as they've cooked and they are dry, they will last there for a long time.
Do you want me to try one, see if they're okay?
Yeah. Good excuse, as always. And time to have a look at the star of the show now, the soup. Wow, it's looking lovely. Next I'm going to add a little lemon to the soup. It's something which is typical of this particular recipe, but I've got here one which is already halved. There'll be half a lemon for the entire recipe. Do not go mad and put lots of lemon. We're making soup, not lemonade. And the reason why I'm adding the lemon, by the way, is to contrast some of the sweetness of the ingredients. That's why you don't want too much in it. A good hot stir to mix the lemon and let's have a look at it. Oh. I know this is piping hot, but I think in a cold day like this, the only way you can eat it, it is piping hot. You want to be lovely and warming. Now, I'm not sure if in Tuscany they do this, but I do it with all of my soup. A little olive oil, even if it's just a tiny little drop, followed by my homemade croutons. And it is ready as it is, if you like, but a tiny little amount of Parmesan cheese on top will not do any harm. And let's try whilst everything is still nice and hot. It's absolutely delicious. It's lovely and velvety, the beans, and you can also use any type of beans. I did say cannellini, but if you want to use borlotti beans, use borlotti beans, anything you like. Clearly you're moving away from the traditional recipe, but who cares? It's lovely, and it goes to show really that you do not have to spend an arm and a leg to have a beautiful meal, especially on a cold day like this, and everything is genuine. And even if you were to use frozen ingredients, it will not be that different. It's entirely up to you. So, buon appetito, make it. I hope you do make it, and let me know if you enjoy it, like much as I'm going to enjoy it. Arrivederci e grazie. Ciao.